And welcome back. Um, as I was saying, atmospheric sources of our soil nitrogen primarily came from lightning, and that was up until the Industrial Revolution. So, when lightning strikes, the incredible amount of heat and energy released changes atmospheric nitrogen into a solid nitrogen form that settles into the soil. Um, Once cars became very commonplace for people, we started to see a big increase in the amount of nitrogen oxides that came from the combustion of fossil fuels. Again, in urban areas, these are usually largely from cars. Nitrification is a process that happens when ammonium, or NH4 plus, turns into a nitrite, NO2. Other bacterial species can convert the nitrite into a nitrate, NO2 into NO3. Um, Again, I know these are heavy in the chemistry terms, and we will work with those, but please remember the general process of nitrification is turning ammonium into nitrite and then nitrite into nitrate. Um, Farmers, as I said before, tend to augment their soil or change their soil by adding fertilizers to it. And every fertilizer is going to have what's called an NPK ratio, the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium ratio. Nitrogen is always listed first and is in most fertilizers either equal to the other numbers or high compared to the others, at least in commercial fertilizers. These are given to the soil because with modern agriculture techniques, we strip nitrogen from the soil. Nitrogen is used by plants to grow and to reproduce. And so, as these plants are grown and harvested, we're taking the nitrogen out of the soil. It's very difficult for plants to be grown on the same field for many years at a time without adding nutrients to it. A way around adding commercial fertilizer is crop rotation, where legumes like soybeans and alfalfa are planted during a resting period to allow soil to recover and add nitrogen to it. The symbiotic relationship between bacteria and legumes is how most of the nitrogen is added into the soil around the world. Legumes are the plants, beans and things, that have that symbiotic relationship with bacteria. Nitrogen fixation. This is how I turn atmospheric nitrogen into usable nitrogen. So usually we do it with bacteria. We have free-living soil bacteria, cyanobacteria, called blue-green algae. It's not really an algae, that's why it's in quotations there. It is capable of converting nitrogen, atmospheric nitrogen, into ammonia, which is NH3, and ammonium, NH4 plus. Symbiotic bacteria like Rhizobium, which is pictured right here, lives on the nodules. Nodules are these little bumps of legumes. Like I said, the beans and the legume family are the plant family that is able to host these kinds of bacteria that do nitrogen fixation. So between these two, I take all of that atmospheric nitrogen and turn it into ammonia and ammonium. Both are usable solid forms. Once I have ammonium in the soil, or nitrate, NO3 negative, once I have these two compounds in the soil, the plants around or in the that are growing in that soil can absorb the nitrogen and turn it into amino acids or nucleic acids. These are the two, these are the two compounds that all living things must have. Amino acids are used to make proteins, and nucleic acids are used to make DNA, RNA, ATP, and NADP. DNA and RNA are the molecules of heredity. That's what determines what you look like and how you reproduce and what makes you you. ATP and NADP are used for energy. For example, ATP is adenosine triphosphate. It's formed with adenine, a nitrogen base, and triphosphate, three phosphate molecules. When I break a phosphate molecule off of this bigger molecule, I release energy, and that energy is used to do biological processes in the organism. Normally, the building blocks that we formed, the amino acids and nucleic acids, are passed through onto other trophic levels through consumption or decomposition. So we cannot absorb ammonium and turn it into an amino acid. Instead, we have to eat plants that have amino acids in them, or eat the animals that ate the plants to be able to pass those molecules on. Finally, we have ammonification. Ammonification. Decomposers convert organic nitrogen, CHON, and that is basically an acronym for the elements of life: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. We take that organic nitrogen compound, it could be an amino acid or nucleic acid, we turn it into, or the bacteria and decomposers turn it into ammonia and ammonium. A lot of bacteria and fungi are able of converting amino acids and nucleic acids this way. This is necessary because we have to be able to turn our large CHON compounds, like an amino acid, the protein building block, into these compounds, ammonia and ammonium, that can then be reabsorbed by plants. So it completes that small cycle we looked at. And finally, denitrification. A completely different set of bacteria can turn nitrites, and nitrous oxides into molecular nitrogen. So this is returning nitrogen back to the atmosphere. This is the final stage. They do this under anaerobic conditions, so no oxygen. What happens, especially we take nitrites, nitrates, and nitrous oxides all have an oxygen component. And by breaking those apart, these anaerobic bacteria can release oxygen, and that enables them to do respiration. As we learned in the carbon cycle, oxygen is necessary for most organisms to do respiration. Once this is accomplished, nitrogen is released back into the atmosphere, and we have a complete cycle. I know that was a lot, and that was confusing. This particular slide I would print out or copy down or memorize in some way. This is the breakdown. Molecular nitrogen in the air can be fixed into ammonia by a few species of prokaryotes. So that's what's happening down here. Other bacterial species can convert ammonia into NO2, and others into NO3. So I make from ammonia or ammonium, I can make nitrite and nitrate. Producers can take up the ammonium and the nitrate and use it to make CHON. A CHON would be like an amino acid. Decomposers use those CHON molecules, like amino acids, to produce more ammonia. And finally, the recycling is complete when my nitrite and other nitrous oxides are turned back into atmospheric nitrogen by these guys over here. So again, this is the general cycle all in one shot. This is what you definitely need to remember. Sometimes in an ecosystem, all of our nutrients, or not all of them, but a lot of our nutrients are lost. And we want to know, or we want to look at the role of vegetation in nutrient cycles. Remember, most of the nutrient cycling begins with plants. So this was an experiment done by Hubbard Brook, where he clear-cut 38-acre areas from this watershed and then measured the amount of water movement and nutrient loss. And what happened when in the clear-cut areas, when compared to a non-clear-cut area, huge amounts of water started to be output, and the amount of nutrient loss increased 60-fold for nitrates and at least 10-fold for other nutrients like phosphorus. The reason for this is the plants slow down water movement. Plants are a huge way that we prevent erosion and water loss, and they are responsible for taking in all of these nitrates. So when I take the plants away, all of a sudden the nitrates have nowhere to go, and they get funneled directly into the watershed. This is very important to us, because clear cutting is one of the ways that agricultural land is founded. especially in developing nations where agricultural land is not really readily available. But this experiment tells us that when I clear cut, I lose large amounts of nitrates and large amounts of phosphorus. And this is why when clear-cut lands are claimed for agriculture, they're typically only used for a couple of years before all the nitrogen is gone from that soil and it's unable to produce anymore, which should tell us that clear-cutting is really a very ineffective way to develop agricultural land. Finally, we need to look at nutrient cycles on a global scale. So far we've been looking at the cycling of nutrients in just one ecosystem. But remember, nothing happens all by itself, completely isolated. When one ecosystem loses all of its nutrients due to clear cutting or for whatever reason, another ecosystem has to gain those nutrients. And that happens because of the law of conservation of matter. Remember that no element, no piece of matter can be destroyed or created. It only changes form and moves somewhere else. When ecosystems are linked, we're talking about a global scale. We're cycling at the ecosphere level. The biggest cycle we have on the global scale is the water cycle. And hopefully the water cycle is not new to anyone. This is covered all the way from elementary school up. Water is the universal solvent. That's where all of the chemical reactions of life take place. Water dissolves everything that makes us alive. If we look at water, we're also looking at the source of hydrogen. Hydrogen is found in all of the elements of life we need: lipids, carbohydrates, amino acids, and nucleic acids. The Earth's oceans, ice caps, glaciers, lakes, rivers, and soil contain about 1.5 billion cubic kilometers of water. Ton of water on Earth. And it's been estimated that all of the Earth's water is split open by plant cells and reconstituted about every 2 billion years. Now remember, the Earth is only 4.6 billion years old, and life has only been around for about 3.8 billion. Photosynthetic life, only about 2.5 billion. So all of the water on Earth, if this estimate is true, has been recycled at least one time. Ocean water accounts for about 98% of our water reserves. That's a ton of our water reserves. Most of the water's in the ocean. About 1.8% is found in ice, the two polar ice caps, and in mountain glaciers. Only 0.5% of the available water on Earth is found in the water table and groundwater. That is, we'll look at these numbers again later, but this is why fresh water is so important and so hard to come by for a lot of people on Earth. The atmosphere contains only 0.001% of the Earth's water, but that small little percentage is the major driver behind the weather and climate on Earth. Without that water component, our weather systems would be entirely different. The reason this water cycle works, it's all driven by this guy here, by solar energy. Evaporation over the ocean is faster than precipitation over the ocean. We take water out of the ocean faster than it's put back in. Therefore, the net movement of water is going to happen from the ocean to the land. About 60% of the precipitation that falls on land is either evaporated or transpired by plants. Transpiration means that water moves through the plant and is evaporated from the leaves. The remainder of water is runoff, like here surface runoff, or is infiltrated and becomes groundwater. This is that picture a little bit bigger so we can see what's going on. Here I have water being stored in the ocean, evaporating off, condensing into clouds, and then precipitating onto, if I precipitate onto ice sheets, then it's stored. It may melt and run off into streams. We have surface runoff, where water moves from the surface and directly down into the oceans. Transpiration, where the plants take in water and then evaporate it up. Or infiltration, where the water moves down into the ground and is stored as groundwater, and in some cases in freshwater lakes and streams. Eventually this groundwater will find its way to discharge into the ocean. And I'm going to stop there again, and we'll pick it up with part 3.